Talking Miami Dolphins football on the Our Football Network, Our Football YouTube channel. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in and joining me because we're talking Miami Dolphins football is Jason Sarney now with Athlon Sports. How's it going, Jason?
Happy holiday season, Greg. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to speaking some football with you.
Yeah, because the last time we talked, it really wasn't going well. Tua had just been injured. There was a lot of chaos in Miami at that time. But as you had said, there was a time when Tua was expected back early enough that the Dolphins could potentially salvage their season. And we're at that point now. I think a couple of weeks ago, I remember looking at the schedule and saying, well, the schedule's pretty good. Even if they lose to Green Bay, which is, that's if they win that, then they're in great shape. But that's a game where, all right, you lose that game, but there's a lot of winnable games after Green Bay. And so do you think the Dolphins have to win out?
Well, the funny thing is they should win out, but that doesn't punch their ticket guaranteed to get them in. The cookie needs to crumble a certain way with help. Now, on the other end, they could lose a game, and if they get even more miraculous help, they could still sneak in. So, Dolphin fans, you need to understand there are paths, but they're not easy. Please, disclaimer, less than 10% statistically to make it, and it's a reason being. But they have a few different scenarios. You can have fun playing with those playoff predictors.
And it is, but if they can get there based on the fact that there's still, an injury here or there, and we'll get caught up on that too. But do you think that they have the firepower, even if they were to get to the postseason because of the favorable schedule, to do anything when they get there?
Wow. Where they've put themselves, and believe it or not, I know this might sound ridiculous, but they could be a 5 seed if certain things go. So you're not getting a home game. But to answer your question, the firepower for the Dolphins, is really going to be dependent on the cold weather aspects, because they still have to, in the regular season, go to Cleveland, lake effect snow potential, go to New York, very cold and windy potential with maybe precipitation, what have you. And now you're looking at you sneak into the playoffs. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to KC? Didn't go last year well. No. You're going to go to Buffalo? Don't even get me started.
Yeah, right.
And then you look at Pittsburgh. You look at other areas, Baltimore, and none really ring firepower, because it's not like the Jacksonville Jaguars are hosting a playoff.
That's
game,
true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So tough sledding for firepower, for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of that firepower, because I was taking a look at the latest, matter of fact, to pop up the latest Our depth chart. And offensively, depth chart's one thing, but statistically speaking is another thing too, because it looks to me that you've got Waddle and Hill, and you've got Jonnu playing incredibly well. And then, of course, you've got Devon in the backfield. But other than that, I just don't see anything else in the passing game. Do you expect that to possibly get any better? It just doesn't seem very deep.
No, it doesn't. And this has been something that is a top-heavy wide receiver issue from last year, which was the case. And Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are both having off years this year, of course, because of the absence of Tua for sure. But, Tyreek Hill is not playing, even with Tua, at his max, not 100 yards produced in a game since week 1, So when you look at where he's finding his ability to get the ball into the hands of playmakers, it's become Devon Achane, who, for my money right now, is Alvin Kamara territory and dual threat rushing and receiving as a running back. And Achane's having a phenomenal year. And tight end Jonnu Smith has been one of the best, if not the best, at the position, not named Brock Bowers, in the last month. So teams are taking away that deep ball, even if it's not something that could be an easy scenario for Tua in a colder, windy weather situation. But Tua is doing a terrific job finding the people in pockets like a Smith, like an Achane, and they're doing business after the catch. Of course, Waddle, a couple of games ago, had a nice game against the Patriots. But, he's going to have to, if they get to the playoffs, find ways to make Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle a bit more prevalent in the offense, and having Smith complementary and Achane, use him how you're using him. Don't change a thing with him. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I know Tua is not the most accurate deep passer, and that everybody knows that. So the fact is, but you look there and you see Waddle's got the top average at 13.4, and you would expect at some point, it's not going to happen this year, but you would think at some point though they're going to have to add somebody to stretch the defense, even though you think Tyreek Hill is the type of player that anybody would love to. But I don't look at Tyreek Hill as the type of guy that stretches defenses. He just makes defenses panic every time he's running around out there. He could do anything. So it's not about it. And he's not just like a vertical threat. He's just give you the ball and see what happens. But is that something that you think Miami definitely has to do, is find somebody? Or do you think because Tua is not the most accurate deep threat guy that that's just not going to be the way the Miami's going to run their offense?
I mean, look, they've tried to do that, in the last several years, in adding that third wide receiver, or draft that third wide receiver. Even you bring in a guy like an Odell Beckham Jr., which is not the Odell Beckham Jr. from
No.
5, 7, 9 years ago, what have you. Complimentary guys like a River Craycraft, who's back, a couple of games from injury, missed really the majority of the season. He's a good player, but these are not fearful players. Like, you look at some of the other teams in the NFL, and there is that third or fourth guy that can create at least attention, which makes life easier for your other main weapons. I mean, look at the Lions, look at the Eagles, look at these are top end teams that just have multiple options at wide receivers,
How has the rookie class looked, including, of course, Jalen Wright in the backfield? Who has been the most impressive?
Oh, I mean, we have not seen enough of Jalen Wright, which is unfortunate, and they draft second rounder Patrick Paul, in kind of all right, we're going to develop him. But Chop Robinson has had some really good sparks. He had a 4-game tear going into the Green Bay Packer game, in which he really, don't look at a stat sheet, but if you're going to look at a stat sheet, you'll see all zeros. He did play, 40-50% of the snaps, but he was just handled. The Packers beat the Dolphins. The defense did not do much. They missed tackles. They did not generate run stopping abilities, setting the edge. They were just bad. So Chop Robinson is on an off week, but going into that game, he had basically ran through that rookie wall. He started getting some pressures, started really developing. So the rookie class is still, I can't answer the question yet, because you have guys like Muhammad Kamara who hasn't played. Patrick Morris just got brought back up from injury reserve and didn't really play well on, the last game. So this is an incomplete grade in Malik Washington. Yes, the fumble. I'm not going to hold that against Malik.
Sure.
He's been a very good rookie returner, and the way he handles his business, rushes when he is asked a couple of times, blocks in that system that McDaniel needs everyone to block. He's a good player, and he has the confidence of a Tyreek Hill, of the veterans, that says, this kid Malik, he's our guy, he's good. So a muffed punt, sure, it was very early. 99.9%, Greg, and everyone, they were going to lose that game even if he had a 70-yard return. So don't hold this loss on Malik Washington. But the rookie class is, to me, a B- if I have to grade it, but it's really an incomplete at the moment.
Matter of fact, Dave Syvertson, our scout here, does a weekly Rookie of the Week awards video, and Chop was the top defensive rookie for a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, okay. And sort of Duck, we got to put him in the class too, because he was signed after the class. And
he was one of those undrafted finds. Every year the Dolphins are plucking, had to do it, these undrafted free agents off of the wire, so to speak. And Storm did not have a good game against the Packers. He had probably one of the worst rated games you could have, but he's a young kid with potential. They've hit relatively on undrafted defensive backs.
Talk about the injury situation. So what's the latest? Who could possibly be back, including, of course, Bradley Chubb? He's the big name.
Don't expect Chubb this week. I think we're going to see what happens if they win in the next 2 weeks. If they pull off a game or two, or they're getting W's, then that's the time to expect, hopefully, Chubb back.
Okay.
But I think Kendall Fuller, you need him back. He's on track to play, concussion protocol. Last couple of weeks he's been out, but the Jets have a pair of good wide receivers, regardless of what they have record-wise. They have Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. So you need all hands on deck. And Kendall Fuller is certainly a guy that they need to come back. He's been missing 3-4 games.
Yeah. Armstead, he's just always banged up. That's just
Armstead will play unless it's announced now that he's like literally, he can't play.
Yeah.
Please don't take anything literally with Tehran. It's always going to be veteran rest. And he's a guy you could drop in the middle of a scenario with no practice and say, yeah, I'll do my job. So I expect him to play.
And Phillips said that's the big loss of the year, right?
Yeah.
Nothing you can do about that. Yeah, he's just a guy you just can't replace. At this day and age, you got to have pass rushers, and you take one of your top pass rushers out, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a shame with Jalen. But again, he's rehabbing ahead of schedule and like a monster. So if there's a comeback of a comeback, this is the comeback kid. I mean, if you look all the way back into his college, he was almost ready to have a medical retirement.
That's true.
Because of some injury, some horrible injury, So this is someone who, like you said, you can't replace, but you can't keep down. So next year, I expect, knock on wood, if he could be healthy, a comeback year for Jalen Phillips. If he's on the field, he's going to produce.
The tight end room, once you get past Jonnu, that needs some help. It looks like they're going to have to. Yeah.
So. Short answer. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have a good kid in Julian Hill who's a good blocker, right? He can block well, but too many penalties, too many mistakes. He's not necessarily, the next Travis Kelce or George Kittle as a receiver, So Hills has still got a big hill to kind of overcome to have a continued long career with the Dolphins or in the league. Obviously, Jonnu Smith is phenomenal and doing well the last couple of weeks. In fact, he has the highest statistical output of any Dolphin tight end ever in the last 3 weeks. So he's playing phenomenal football, and Durham Smythe is just a veteran jag at the moment.
I was so happy. I was so happy too, because in my dynasty league, I was already my whole idea was, well, it's going to be a really good draft class for tight ends next year, and that's when I'm going to have to improve my tight end class. That's the one weak spot on my team. I don't have any depth, and John was like my one guy on the watch list out of 5 guys, and I just never even thought about picking him up. And then all of a sudden, he has the one game. I said, hey, I got nothing to lose. I'll pick him up, and then it's just been amazing the last few weeks. What has happened? Is it him being healthy? Is it, hey, we need to really get this tight end position as part, because it hasn't been a part of the offense really since the new regime has been here, or new, but current. So how did this all of a sudden become part of the offense?
I think it's been something that they've wanted to input with the right person. And Jonnu Smith came into this year. I was very excited about his usage because he does something exactly similar to someone that Mike McDaniel was used to coaching, and that was George Kittle. He's not as good as George Kittle, but it's the yards after the catch, the consistency of how much he gains from point of catch till after he now gets tackled. He matched George Kittle in the last 8 years of both their careers, averaging about 7 yards per catch per reception. Those are the 2 best in the league at that. So it's by design. Again, some of the personnel that they do bring in, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Jonnu Smith, has a similarity or a history with Mike McDaniel. And I think they're trying to find, what tight end can block, can get downfield. And, Mike Gesicki was a fun guy to watch catch the ball, but he wasn't doing much after that. And that was the last thing that we had from an actual viable threat of a tight end who's had a couple of games in Cincinnati, sure, but consistently get the ball to Jonnu Smith. He's going to turn 5, 6, 7 more yards, if not more. And that's what we're seeing every week. He's just producing after he catches the ball.
So this was definitely all supposed to be part of the offense, but it just didn't have anybody. Is that basically what it was, you think?
Yes. Now, remember, he came in. They already had Gesicki from the Adam Gase regime. You know what I mean? So he was there, and it just didn't work in that 1 year. Now, Durham Smythe, different kind of guy, more of that kind of workman guy. You need 7 yards? I'm going to get you 7 yards in a foot. That's the kind of guy that Smythe was and is. And when relied upon last year, he was good. And he was the 3rd highest receiver from the Dolphins last year, which
Yeah.
just talks about that top-heavy aspect of the room from last year and even this year.
Yeah.
But now you put in the skill set with the need, and Jonnu Smith, another thing he does well consistently is red zone usage and scoring. And that's another thing. If you're going to be in the red zone and defenses are going to be keen on Achane, Hill, and Waddle, now there's a guy that is going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities against linebackers and just an open middle of the field to get his yardage and score.
Offensive line has been this way for several years, very inconsistent. Some guys are okay, some guys aren't. Are you particularly down on any specific linemen or linemen that you think the Dolphins are going to need to move on from eventually?
I mean, look, you have Aaron Bruce playing phenomenal football in the middle. No complaints with the center. But then, you have to, and you need consistency next to him on the interior, on the guards. You have an injured right tackle in Austin Jackson, who now you're looking at Kendall Lamb, a journeyman who's taken over for him. There was a slight maybe experimentation in practice, potentially moving rookie Paul to the right side. But his natural spot is the left, in which the incumbent Teron Armstead is there. So this offensive line will probably have a weird look or change next year, But this year, it's they're playing to their best ability through the injury, through inconsistencies. Isaiah Wynn is a guy you need back. You really miss him, who had a phenomenal year before injury last year. So while the line could be doing good things, this offense is designed to get the ball out of hand to his hands very quickly. They're not a type of a rugged offensive line that's going to be that ground control, push you forward. This is finesse. It's finesse. It's quick. It's by design that McDaniel has. So I don't love that, but numerically, statistically, they've been okay. Eye test, not really. Tua was gotten to a lot on Thursday night, and he's been gotten to, and they, I think, need to have a little bit more of a mindset in drafting and develop interior linemen. That would be my hope.
And what about on defense? Has there been a couple of players who have not picked up, their game this season that you think has hurt them a little bit?
I mean, look, they had to drop a guy like David Long, who had a phenomenal year last year and picked up with Detroit, now doing okay. You drop a guy like Marcus May, picked up by LA, interception, first game there. So very weird stuff from the guys who maybe weren't producing, and now they're producing a month later, a week later. You got to love that if you're in Miami.
Of course.
But I'm going to look at the guys who are producing steadily, and that's your Zach Sealers, who's, for my money, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, the best defensive lineman in the league, probably, or at least the most unheralded, most underrated.
There you go. Most underrated, yep.
There you go. Calais Campbell, who's in his 57th year. I'm kidding. It's his 17th year. He's phenomenal. He's playing 50% of the snaps, but every one of them counts. Emmanuel Ogbo is playing very well. Him and Calais Campbell are excellent at batted balls, especially on third down. They're doing that almost as good as a sack. Jalen Ramsey is a hiccup or two here or there, is one of the best in the business, and he's having a great year against the run, against the pass, blitzing. So Kendall Fuller is a guy you hope returns to his form back from injury. They need him in the stretch run, but they've had some inconsistency at safety. Jordan Poyer has not been good. I mean, Dolphins community members are thinking that he's some sort of a Trojan horse sent in by Buffalo to say, hey, I'm going to destroy from the inside. But it's been that kind of year for Poyer, unfortunately.
You don't know when they're going to lose it. And
speaking of losing, you might lose Javon Holland, who's he's injured. He's playing banged up, but Javon Holland is underproducing. And I'll tell you, to get back to Bradley Chubb, I mean, there might be a small percentage that he plays this week. I don't know for sure at this exact moment, but he's a guy that could help a 4-game win streak very quickly.
Yep. Let's get to, I know that we are talking on Jet Week, but I do want to ask you, since I have you this week, I want to ask you a little bit about the opponent next week, Houston. I know you haven't done any research or anything like that. But let's just say Miami beats the Jets, which if you beat the Jets, trust me, as a Jet fan, I don't know what to tell you. But let's just go by the fact that Miami will win this week. They'll win and cover. That'll be a really big game, because that's pretty much that's the toughest. Is that the last toughest team on the schedule for Miami?
From the roster standpoint, yes. Elemental or otherwise, different stories. But from a roster standpoint, this is a talented team in the Texans.
And what do you? I know you haven't done a lot of research on it yet, but what do you think about that matchup for what you have seen about Houston this season?
Well, it's a tough matchup to stomach in and of itself in this situation because of the Dolphins' history with the Texans in that trade, that essentially the Tunsil trade that set the stage for the roster. So there's that annoyance, let's call it, because the Texans have beat the Dolphins in that trade. They've gotten to the playoffs. They have a franchise quarterback who's gotten the playoff win in C.J. Stroud, having a off year, but his weapons are those of which that can hurt the Dolphins. He's got a great crew of wide receivers, a good tight end, good running game, and he himself could do business on the ground if he needs to. So this is a tough game. This was the game that the Dolphins I had in my mind that could be the tolerable loss before the Packer game. I really would have loved the Dolphins to have beat the Packers and say that they can win on the road. And I honestly, tell you the truth, going into the Texans game this season, that's been a loss in my chart, in my build from even September. So this is not going to be an easy game, regardless of any injury or anything. The Texans are a team that's fighting for either a title in their division or to fall into a wild card, and that's a big difference. So they're not taking their feet off the gas.
Yeah, I don't foresee that division is pretty bad. I mean, I know the Colts are still hanging around, but Houston's beat them twice already. So I think they're in pretty good shape. Miami is definitely going into that game as the desperate team. So we'll see how it goes. But Houston is not a very good home favorite. So that means that whoever they play, and they just played a couple of weeks ago and lost to Tennessee at home, whoever they play at home, that's a team that usually lets the other team hang around. And you get a lot of close football games. So that's coming up next week or this week, depending on when you're catching this little segment here, because I know we're going to talk about this next week as well. But anyway, Jason, your gut feeling before I let you go on Miami the rest of the way, whether or not you think it's in the cards for them to make the run and somehow find a way to make the playoffs.
Oh my God. This is the toughest kind of question in this kind of year, because at best scenario, you're going to sneak into a playoff game. And then the question is going to be, here we are again on the road in the elements. Are they going to be able to do that? If they don't make the playoffs, you're looking at a mediocre mid-round draft pick. You're looking at maybe blowing it up again. So if someone puts a gun to my head and I have to say an answer, I think they win enough to get in if they get help, but I think they're going to need the help. So I think it's going to be a week 18. They're going into it. They got to win, and they need this to happen. If I have to say an answer, they're probably not going to get what they need to happen. But I think they're going to take care of at least their side of it some way, shape, or form. Because remember, you go undefeated the rest of the way, not a guarantee. You could lose one, not a guarantee, but they could still get in. So in one way, shape, or form, I think they're going to say, all right, last game, we got to win, but we need this. It ain't all going to happen. So we might.
Well, they got to catch Denver, and at least you're trying to catch a team that hasn't been there in a few years, that has a rookie quarterback. So, is that what you look at as well? Is you're looking at that Denver team and saying,
I think Denver makes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Bo Nix is playing great. It's their spot to lose as much as it's Miami's spot to sneak in. It's not Miami's spot to sneak in anymore. It's Denver's spot to lose. And ultimately, that's what I do believe gun to head is going to happen. They're going to fall short.
I know we're going to talk, and if they make the postseason, we'll definitely talk. But if they don't, and we talk in the offseason about free agency the next time we talk, and the draft and all that, last question, just give me definite position that, or if there is one, it's a clear-cut, definite, this position, this is their first-round pick, this is their top free agent acquisition. Do they have one position?
It's a really good question. It really, truly is. The long scope of it is you got to solidify the interior of that offensive line. The trenches, I think, on both sides of the ball are extremely important. They could use a phenomenal Mike middle linebacker. They could use, a cornerback who is going to replace veteran Jalen Ramsey, or a safety to replace either Poyer, who's done, or Holland. They need a lot. That's the problem. Is they need a lot. And of course, if this is one of or Tyreek Hill's last year, you need a wide receiver to go opposite Jalen Waddle, because there's no one on the roster right now going into next year who is a surefire 1A, which is, or 1B, however you want to look at it, like Waddle is. So, man, next year, this coming draft would be a phenomenal year for the Dolphins to have the stockpile of picks they had in 2020. But here we are. It's going to be a decent stockpile of back-end picks, but they're going to need to hit on their first, second, and third picks desperately.
Will Hill be back?
Who is he?
Hill?
Hill will be back. He's cryptic on social media. I never like to read into what he says as truth. He likes to joke around. He likes to mislead. But this could very well be his last year. I'm not going to guarantee it, but it will not shock me whatsoever in Miami, however that happens. But don't read everything he says on social media as the gospel, because he likes to misdirect and have some fun.
Doesn't it seem like he's enjoying himself there? Doesn't it seem like he's fitting in well and everything's okay?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, from last year, yeah, absolutely. It's been a weird year for him, though.
Yeah, it has.
It's been a really weird year.
I'm not sure that moving anywhere would change that, though. So, but I don't know. I'm not him.
We will see. We will see. But, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of veterans, a lot of contracts that they're going to have to look at.
And I'm sure some team out there is going to try to fork over a ton of cash that maybe the Dolphins just either can't afford or just don't want to. Because like you said, there's a lot of different spots the Dolphins are going to have to fill, and not just one. So, but again, we're going to talk about that. And in the meantime, if you're a Dolphin fan, just check out the link in the description of the video. We'll show you exactly where to go as far as Athlon Sports, where you can check out Jason's content. By the way, do you have your own show yet set up, your own podcast with Athlon?
You know what? I don't know if it's going to do the podcast direction moving forward.
Okay.
I love to write. I joke around. I got a face for radio and a voice for print, so I like to stick around in the writing area.
Okay. Well, if not, we'll fix that ourselves. Appreciate it, Jason. And have a great rest of the season if we don't talk to you. And thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much, Greg. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you.